Welcome to the Wandering Tangent podcast. I'm BJ. With me is Jeff and Gary. And today we're going to talk about the Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 1, Episode 26, The Neutral Zone, originally aired in 1988.
Boy.
Okay, BJ.
Boy.
This is a weird one. This is a weird episode.
Why are you telling me you're the one that chose this?
Honestly, there are so many good Next Generation episodes. There's so many good ones.
Yeah,
and when I really came down to the one I wanted to talk about, it was this weird one of all things.
I had many questions about your choice, like why you chose one of the don't know if much blind is a good term, but the generally not highly regarded season 1 of Next Generation.
Yes. I've heard many things about Next Generation, many good things, but most of those good things come from later seasons. Most of the bad things I hear about Next Generation come from the first season, Jeff.
Yes. It is exactly the wrong kind of episodes to start with. And anyone who wants to get into the Next Generation, Season 1 is a good way to make sure you never watch the rest of the episodes. They're definitely something special, I will say.
I mean, to be fair, I was kind of surprised she didn't have us watch the bug episode.
That is a good one. That is a very good one.
Is that the one where everybody gets like a weird parasite and then they start having dreams?
No. Dreams? No. The bug episode is I guess we're going to spoiler this
that's fine.
40-year-old TV. Oh, that just made me feel old.
No.
It's
more like 30 years old, BJ. It's 30 years old.
It's
slightly less old, but anyway.
Well, this was May 1988, so it's closer to 40 than it is to 30. But anyway, no, the bug episode is the one where there are parasites, and like the climax is they're in like Starfleet headquarters, and like Picard's not infected, but like everyone else is, and they like have dinner, and it's like a bunch of grubs, and they're like eating the grubs, and like Riker's there, but
they're eating worms at dinner. Yeah,
Riker's pretending to be infected, but he's not. So Riker and Picard kick butt, and then they find like the source, which is like a guy that they shoot him with phasers, but doesn't kill him, and then like a bug thing comes out of his chest, all alien styled, and then they shoot the bug, and the guy explodes. It's very not the rest of Star Trek Next Generation.
I believe it's the episode before the one we're reviewing, or at least maybe it's 2 before, but it's called Conspiracy. And yeah, and it has some very graphic violence of exploding people infected with aliens. And yeah, they were really upset about the censorship that the show was under, so they decided to make a really graphic and awful episode just to kind of push the limits. But yeah, that would have been a great episode to talk about. But no, we're talking about this one.
Instead he chose this one, which is like 2 plots in one, and one plot seems like it should be way more important, but it's like the lesser plot.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start. Okay. BJ,
go ahead.
I want to hear BJ's kind of. Actually, let's just jump right into spoilers for this particular episode.
That's fair enough.
I think we're a little late for that.
No, we haven't spoiled this particular
conspiracy.
We haven't spoiled this particular episode yet. We've kind of talked about it, and you're kind of sighing, and I'm kind of like, or Jeff's kind of hesitant about it, and I'm kind of like scratching my head as well. But let's start getting into this particular episode. Okay, Jeff.
Okay, so, actually, I'm going to set the stage here.
BJ, you set the stage, yeah.
Okay, so I will admit I've not watched a lot of original series Trek. I was born and raised on Next Generation. So, were the Romulans like one of the major threats in OG Star Trek, along with like the Klingons? Jeff?
So,
I'm throwing this at you.
So
As
the
a resident
original, I
Trek
know that
expert.
there is, yeah. I know for sure the Romulans are in one episode of the original series. I don't know if they're on more than one episode, but they appear on one episode. They're conniving aliens that are definitely an opposition, and they have a dual battle that's almost like a battleship versus a submarine, except you have a cloaked ship versus the Enterprise that's going after them, and it's a whole thing. So yes, they're in the original series, but in the original series, they were this mysterious aliens who are very reclusive, that are powerful, yet they haven't made contact at all with them. So here in this episode, we get an introduction to the Romulans. And for some of the audience, it's the first time with the Romulans. And for the old school Trekkies, it's bringing back one of the many villains that was really not touched upon very much at all.
Okay, because they do make the Romulans seem like a pretty big deal. It's like, oh, we haven't had contact with the Romulans in almost 50 years, and all of a sudden there's colonies and stations that are just going to have contact from the neutral zone, and we have to go find out if it's the Romulans. This is really important because if it's the Romulans, then things are going to go bad. Blah, da, 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 da. And then we have this weird fish out of water plot, which takes up like 66% of the episode,
Yeah.
where we find these 3 random people from the 20th century, early 21st, like frozen in this weird satellite thing, which just happens to be floating by the Enterprise. And they're like, oh, what's this? Let's go. Holy crap, there's people.
Well,
Yeah.
the concept of time travel, especially in the Star Trek universe, is not new. It's a very easy way for them to show kind of the dichotomy of the future versus now. So conveniently, most of the people that are time traveling are from our time period, as opposed to, I don't know, any other time period.
Okay, but why tied with this? Why this episode? Why tied with this thing, which at the end is said to be like, oh, it's like this big thing for the Trek universe. The Romulans are back, and they're going to start interfering with stuff, and da 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 da. But that's like the side story to these 3 people from who are just like, oh, we're fish out of water. I need to go talk to my banker. I'm a music star. I'm a homemaker, and I'm depressed because everyone I know is dead, which makes sense, I guess, for her. The other 2 guys are just kind of what?
So I get it. It is very odd that they would have this extreme dichotomy. I've got no justification for that, BJ, because like I felt the same thing, that this was a very odd dichotomy of storylines, both of which probably would have deserved their own episode, but instead we got a kind of a strange car wreck of a 2 episodes jamming together.
Like plot A takes all the tension out of plot B because we just kind of have to float. Well, not float. We just have to like rush through all the Romulan stuff because we have to do more with the people from the past or whatever.
Okay.
Okay. No, Jeff, you
go ahead, Gary. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so these people from the past are on this ship, and one of them seems to be rather clever. He's like a banker or businessman of some sort, and he's got, a lot he had a lot of money and resources back in the day. And so the question is, he starts to interfere with the second plot line because he wants more answers, and I don't know if he quite understands. And admittedly, from his point of view, it's actually being handled very poorly. I don't think he quite understands the fact that he is on a military ship, or at least a, not just some sort of like civilian cruise liner. He's on like a genuine, state-funded expedition, and there's very real tensions going on. I don't think this is kind of like a bad writing on the part of the show writers, because he's kind of not reacting in the way that a normal human would react, or at least that's my impression.
I think he kind of understands it, because he does have some throwaway line about how, a military career doesn't mean all that much, and there's the part where like all the three people from the past are talking, and the musician's like, these guys, I'm tempted to slip into a southern accent, but my southern accent is terrible. That's like,
do it, BJ, do it.
No.
Okay.
Negatory, Batman. But yeah, like the musician guy's like, well, these guys don't need us, like, these guys know what they're doing. They don't need us sticking around or trying to mess up their stuff. But yeah, they do kind of a terrible job of explaining these people, like, what's going on, what's changed. They just kind of moralize at them.
I just, and okay. I've got that question of, it's like, they don't, even though this is like a government-run ship, this is a Federation starship. It's a quasi-military starship that I'm likening it to something along the lines of kind of like an armed science vessel that the U.S. military would have for like exploring some far reach of the Earth's oceans or something along those lines. And even then, or even on civilian cruise liners, there would be a lot more control over the situation that could be exerted over the people who are in there. Like, for instance, this guy can just get onto the comms and he can call whoever, or he can get into like the working elevators and go to wherever he wants to.
He can just walk onto the bridge.
Yeah, even a civilian cruise liner, a regular person can't get onto the bridge, right?
And there's like,
or the service areas.
And there's like very literally children on this ship. Like, no kid has ever gone the turbo ever like, I went to see the bridge, and it was like, okay.
You would
like,
think
there's no safeguards for this?
Yeah, there's no safeguards for this.
Yes.
And at some point,
yes, there are no safeguards.
At some point, there's we'll get into like the philosophy that behind a lot of the stuff that happens in this episode as well, but it just kind of seems like there would be like some safeguards. Like he could say, this is the captain. I'm ordering that these individuals have access to only such and such areas of the ship, and if they get out of those areas, you would think Worf would have some sort of security lockdown that he could enact because he's the security officer, right?
Yes, and he can. There are other episodes where they restrict access to different areas of the ship for visitors.
So
by default, they never do that.
So we'll just chalk this up to bad writing on the part of the writers.
Okay. Because I got things to say. I got things
to say.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, I get what you guys are saying. I have a lot to unpack here. So real quick, you mentioned that the Enterprise has like weapons on it, and it's also a science vessel.
Yes.
And there are dedicated science vessels. They're in other episodes and movies. They have no weapons. They get blown up easily if the Klingons come by. So they do exist. The Enterprise is weird because it's a first contact mission.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, it's a weapon. It's a powerful ship, and it's also scientific, but its main mission is actually to go and make first contact with new civilizations and new life forms. So because of that, they kind of have like an all-purpose technology for their mission. But there are other ships like them, but the Enterprise has that special role that, and another ship might make a first contact, but if they're going to intentionally make first contact, they choose the Enterprise, which is supposed to have the finest crew and is also supposed to be a really well-built ship.
But it's
so that's the thing.
But it's
the
not
finest crew and Wesley Crusher.
But it's not a.
I shouldn't make any.
And a kid at the helm.
I shouldn't make any Wesley jokes because he's not even in this episode. Yeah. Thank heavens.
But it's not a dedicated weapons platform. I don't even know if the Federation has a dedicated weapons platform. In its roster, does it?
So there's an episode where they fight the Borg, and as the Borg are invading Earth, they pass by Jupiter, and the Federation sends a military style, like ships that are only supposed to perform like a patrolled barricade kind of a thing, where they beat past some Federation ships, and they're tiny. So they do have military type ships, but they're much smaller, and yeah, against the Borg, they were nothing. So
okay.
I think in Star Trek, they know that a lot of times if you want to get through a situation, it's not about strength. It's not about how good your weapons are. It's how crafty you are, how well you can think, and how well you can plan. I mean, that's usually how they save themselves and win the day when they are in a conflict. It's not just through brute battles. It's through finding some way to outthink or to do something unexpected.
Well, that's good that's good for the plot line of the show. It's just makes it very difficult to peg it, and in the context of thinking about it in a broader sense.
So like at this point, I think it's while Gene Roddenberry's still alive. I think there's, like Jeff said, there's very few strictly military vessels in the Federation. I mean, heck, we're crying out loud. I don't know if the Enterprise is like officially the flagship at this point or just a highly regarded ship, but
I don't know if they've said it in the show, but it is the flagship through the entire series.
Yeah.
But whether the audience really knows that at this point, I don't know. But I think it's kind of inferred from later episodes that they were at this time.
Yeah, but still, it's like the most important ship in the fleet, and there's like a literal civilian population on board, right?
Right.
Yes, there is, because, and they talk about that on a different episode. Picard disagrees with the policy, but it's a very new policy where people are saying, yes, we're going to dedicate our lives to this purpose of the Federation to go and discover and learn in the universe, but to do that, we have to not have children. It's a huge sacrifice. So, but then if you take children on this deep space expedition, they're going where no one's gone before too. It could be, I mean, how do you know that they won't be safe? And I think the Federation comes up with the answer of, you know what, that experience, look, accept the danger. The thing about Star Trek is that, and this is why I wanted to pick this episode, because this is a contrast episode between our world and this world that Roddenberry wanted. And people in Star Trek, they don't look at danger the same way we do. I mean, they don't take unnecessary risks, but when it comes to necessary risks that have high reward, they don't really worry about them. I mean, they'll beam down to a planet even though it's dangerous. They'll go and visit a new alien civilization not knowing how they're going to react.
They'll send the
because
entire
they might
chain
learn
command
something.
down on the planet.
Yeah, they did in the original series. Kirk always went and with the group, which is in the Next Generation, they figured out we have so many characters. We don't need the captain to always be the center of every scene and everything that goes on. We can have different characters do different things. And I think TNG does a really good job of that, where they spend a little time on each character and they let characters have different things that they do. the original series, it was mostly about Kirk, McCoy, and Spock predominantly, but there was other things about other characters too. But it's mostly just them in different situations. Yeah, so that's the reason why I picked this episode. It's the contrast between our world and theirs. In the Star Trek universe, people don't mind danger. Danger's just a part of living. It's not a big deal as long as it's necessary. If it's unnecessary danger, then you avoid it.
Okay,
Go ahead.
no, well, I'm just wondering, so you pointed out the fact that there's a contrast. So let's start diving into that particular contrast. Now, I'm just wondering, Jeff, if you're using this episode as kind of like a showing what the universe is like, because I'm just wondering, the reason I'm wondering this is because I know for a fact, I'm not the most studious person of Star Trek universe,
Yeah.
but in this episode is kind of implying that they're in a post-scarcity society, but they're not. I know for a fact that, as soon as you leave the core worlds of the Federation, there's scarcity. Like, people don't have all of the resources. You get into it's like there's some really, like, the core worlds of the Federation are really, really well off because they've got all this technology and all this energy, but there's a whole bunch of worlds on the periphery that don't have all the technology and all the energy to deal with the situations, and they still use money and they still use exchange, and even the Federation uses exchange, right? Because
there's a lot to talk about with that. I'll try to be brief, but so one of the great things about Star Trek is that they have many, many different worlds. You go to one planet, that planet's like that. You go to another planet, things are different. Star Wars is the same thing. You go to different planets, different circumstances. Some of those planets are utopias. Some of those planets are very dystopic. And Star Trek has often been labeled as a utopian sci-fi. But there's a little bit of a misconception there because they're going to different worlds. The Federation is a utopia in that they have embraced cooperation and peace, and they have forsaken possession and wealth completely. They've done that because they've grown into it. Now, I'll explain more about that in a minute. That's like my main talking point. But
this one I should like.
So there's different worlds. So the worlds you're talking about, where there's scarcity, those are actually outside the Federation. Those are outside. Like the Ferengis who love wealth and tricking people to get money, they're outside the Federation. And I think that's part of the contrast to the show, is the show shows you all these different civilizations, these different ways of thinking, where the Klingons are just like a brutal society, but to the Klingons, that is the right way to live. To humans, it's kind of scary and terrifying, where you settle an argument with knives and things like that. And then you have the Vulcans who have motions just like humans do, but they have decided to forsake emotions in order for logic to bring them greater wisdom and understanding, which is supposed to be a greater reward than what you would get by feeling things. So they can listen to music, but they can't feel good while they listen to music. But it's logic. They're embracing a different way of thinking. And so Star Trek is all about a universe filled with different things. And the great thing about that is that now as a writer, you can write all kinds of stories within this universe because you can make up a new planet with new kinds of things on it.
So,
yeah.
I got a question for you. Who builds the ships? Even in the Federation, who builds the ships?
So in the Federation, there are different shipyards, and those shipyards can be both human.
I think the Federation builds the ships. I mean, like, going back to the other Star Trek thing we talked about was Star Trek motion picture. I believe the new Enterprise, old Enterprise, the Enterprise at the time is like uh, being built or refitted or like whatever inside the Federation shipyard.
So
Yeah, and that was over Earth. Like they were in orbit around Earth when they were doing a refit of the Enterprise. But the Enterprise D was built on a colony, which is Utopia Planitia. It's a Federation colony.
Holy crap!
So
Yeah.
so I got that question though. Is so who built the ship and how did they get paid?
Good question. So this
Do they
is
get
one of the
paid?
things Roddenberry came up with, and that is that inside the Federation, not outside the Federation, other aliens can live however they want, but inside the Federation, nobody uses money. But if the Federation wants something from another group of aliens from another outside the Federation, they might buy and sell.
So
They trade.
it's slave labor then. The Federation elites have enslaved the massive population.
Because like if it's a post-scarcity society, theoretically it's a volunteer workforce doing it because they want to, right? Because in a post-scarcity society, you don't need money. You already have everything you need.
Oh,
Everything
so
you
This
want.
is-
the
this is an
laborers
example
have
of
been
just-
given shelter and clothing and food, and they should just be grateful for it and give their labor freely then. Right. I've heard
Well,
this
as-
line of logic
this-
before.
Well, are we really going to dive into politics here?
No.
It's
Okay,
like
well,
as
look,
compared
I want to
to
make
say
a point.
a modern society where we get paid money so we can buy food and shelter and whatnot, and that should make us happy.
Well, no, but I'm
Right.
just saying. No, what I'm saying is these laborers, like the people who build the ships, they should be compensated for what they have, for the above and beyond effort. Because because I understand a post scarcity society would would do things differently, right? But and so no person would go without food, shelter, and as much replicated food and shelter and entertainment as they can receive. But I'm just wondering what happens to the people who go above and beyond, and how are they compensated for that? Because a person wouldn't just build a starship because they feel good about building a starship. They would want to get something for all of their effort. So what do they
Good,
receive?
Gary. I think you're pointing out the central difference here. And you notice how the three characters in the show, they think just like the way that you're thinking, which is how we're thinking. And the people in the Enterprise are going, I don't understand how these people can think this way. That's the way Riker feels and Picard. But then from the point of view of those three somewhat survivors, the three people from the 20th century, they're like, how can these people look differently? And the two don't understand each other. So the idea that Roddenberry had is that the reason why people would build a spaceship and they would do it without getting paid, and they would do it without anybody like forcing them to. Nobody's going to show up with a gun and say, you better either build this spaceship or go build something else, or you're going to go to jail, or you're going to be homeless or something like that. Nobody did any of that, but they voluntarily went out and found something important to do. And if building the spaceship was something they were good at, they worked at it and they were excited to build a spaceship and to be part of that. And so how can people do that? How can they work for nothing? And the answer that they give in the show is that people work to better themselves. And the reason why, it's a completely different way of thinking. See, we work to somehow get rewards for ourselves. It's like an exchange. You give something to society, society gives back. In the Star Trek universe, there's nothing you want from society. You don't need a mansion or a boat or anything.
Because
really
you
need-
have a holodeck that gives you all of those things for free.
There is a holodeck, and they create it, and then anybody can use it. But here's the thing. I don't think a lot of people say that the Star Trek universe is a socialist society, and I think that's actually wrong.
No,
Um,
I fully understand it's a completely alien post-scarcity society, right?
there, uh, as far as like scarcity, they do have so much technology that it's easy for them to provide for themselves. That's true. But the main point is that they they work to better themselves. That is their paycheck. They actually don't want anything physical. And when you see the people board the Enterprise, they're coming on the Enterprise to live there for years. It's going to be their home. And they might take with them one suitcase, sometimes nothing. You know, Lieutenant Rowe beams aboard the ship. She has no luggage. And that's because they just don't care about things. If Data has a group of items that he carries with him, it's going to be sentimental things. It's going to be a gift from the captain, maybe his medals or something, maybe, but it's going to fit into one suitcase. And so it's the complete and different way of thinking in Star Trek, where people say, how could you show up to work without a paycheck? And the answer is because their work is real. People in Star Trek, they don't watch TV. They don't do any of those kinds of things that we depend on in our time, because they are focused on living their lives and doing something that matters. They're trying to enrich themselves and to enrich humanity and all other life forms that they encounter. So the reason why Picard sacrifices so much to be the captain of the Enterprise is simply because he is pursuing a goal to enrich himself and to provide a service for the Federation, but also all life forms that he encounters. So so my main point is Star Trek is about a utopia. It's about all these people living in a utopia. But are they living in a utopia because they're living within a utopic society, or are they living in a utopia because they're utopian people? They're people that have utopian values, each one of them. And when these three people that come from a more dystopic culture, maybe not an outright dystopic culture, but probably less utopian than the 24th century, when these 20th century people come to the 24th century, they bring some of those more dystopic ideas. But after they spend time amongst these utopian people and they see how things are different, they gradually start to warm up to it. And it's a difficult transition for them because they have to give up on all the things that they loved. I mean,
Well,
the
the housewife, she doesn't need to. I do wonder about the fact.
I guess it is different kinds of giving up. Yeah, they're not like all the same.
I do have to wonder about the fact of why wouldn't they understand the concept of a homemaker? Because of all the jobs that would fit exactly perfectly into the society you're describing, homemaker would probably be at the top of the list. Someone who is a mother, right? She would fit perfectly into that list, and I wonder why they would.
There are homemakers.
So why is this an alien concept to Data?
Because there was this giant war that happened. So the timeline in the Star Trek storyline is that the 20th century went on for a little while and got wrecked badly. There was this terrible cataclysmic war, and there was actually several events where humanity went through a lot of bad things, and as a result of that, a lot of the records and different things were destroyed. So you even get to like the original series where they know bits and pieces about Khan from history, but they don't know a lot of details about him because the records were greatly destroyed from his time.
So I'm just gonna.
So they actually don't know much about the 20th century.
I'm just gonna interject here
Go ahead.
Because this was kind of a question I had while I was watching this episode. Did that get like added in later? Because like like when the banker guy is like, oh, I need to contact my bank, and it's a very important institution, so of course it would last this long. Like, why didn't they just say, well, your law firm probably didn't survive World War III, so so I was wondering if maybe that was like added in later in the lore.
No.
Like
It's in the
retconned in?
original series too.
Okay, so then what?
So Spock talks about it quite a bit.
Okay, but then like they also have like this lady's genealogy going back to when she left.
Yeah. So they have, and the writers do this. They're like, well, we know this, but we don't know that, and you kind of have to piece it together as the audience.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, you guys made a point, and this is it was a good point. It's like, why doesn't Riker just tell them, be like, look, your time, things have changed a lot, your money's all gone. Why does he just spill the beans like that? Why is he like taken back and struggling? And I think part of the reason is because the writers just wanted the audience to go through the grind. I don't think they wanted to give the audience an easy way past the transition. They wanted the transition to be struggling. And so they did the best they could to make sure it struggled. But I think part of it, the way I see it, is that Riker is just taken back by what he's hearing.
So
he knows somewhat about the 20th century people, but he's kind of shocked that humanity was like that. And he makes a comment. He's like, how did we even survive? I think he's mostly just surprised that they act like that. Go ahead.
And to be fair, that's fair. I mean, like, it's like if we encountered like someone from like the early late 1600s or like around then, we would probably be equally aghast as to what they believe is like, you lived like that? It's like,
But I do have to wonder, so another poll I have to question about is, so this guy's clever enough to figure out the comm system, but he's not clever enough to figure out what the comm system is attached to and then start asking questions. I know the computer's very reactive and very capable of answering all kinds of questions in this particular series. Why didn't he, like, when he was asking about having, why didn't the computer respond to his questions for, about his law firm or the status of his finances or anything like that? Like, you would think that the computer would be able to pick up on those questions.
Well, to be fair, you have to like engage computer, right? You have to be like, computer, or like whatever. It's like nowadays your Alexa or like your whatever the Apple version, then it doesn't answer your questions unless you ask it, right?
Yeah.
So
that is certainly true, but still it's
shut up, Alexa.
Did that just happen?
Yes. Shush. Okay.
Speaking of computers,
I think my
it won't be quiet.
It's going to stop interrupting the podcast now.
Oh, should I start saying things to give BJ a hard time, Jeff?
No, because I have headphones on, so my thing won't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we live in a time where our computers are getting fancier and fancier, and I think when TNG was written, I'm not sure if the writers really knew how fancy computers could potentially become, but at the same token, there's a clue in that most people are really surprised when they meet Data, and they're like, Data, you're amazing. And there's been other androids, but none of them are as amazing as Data, but they don't ever explain why Data is so incredibly amazing. And part of it is, they mention it a few times, part of the reason why they are so astounded by him is because of how stable his mind is. His brain is very stable. He has artificial intelligence, but it's not doing unexpected things. It's very, very consistent and stable. There's some sort of balance in there that his creator put in that was way better than other computers. So it could be the reason why the computer is not as fancy as it might be is simply because they want a reliable machine, and that's as good as they can make it without making it unstable. And there's episodes where the computer does do things that it shouldn't do, and it creates problems. But anyway, go ahead.
He's also, I'm very glad that he is benefiting from the moral judgments that we are now making and inferring upon artificial intelligences. I don't know if Jeff, you've heard the trolley question, right?
No, I don't.
So there's
Oh,
trolley.
boy.
The trolley question is a current question that goes around, and it's actually being programmed into artificial intelligences. But it's asked of people, and then our answers are informing the computers, right? And the trolley question is if there's a trolley and there's people on one track, and then there's other people on another track, do you switch? Like, there's an old person on track B and there's a couple of young kids on track A. Do you throw the switch to track B, or do you not throw the switch and leave it on track A? Because this is implying that the trolley is then going to go and, harm the people on the track. So do you
have to? It's a question of sacrifice. Who do you sacrifice?
Well, yeah,
the old man or the young people?
It's a moral question, right? And at some point in this episode, Data makes a moral judgment, right? Something that should not be done, that isn't driven by logic or orders or anything of that sort. He makes a moral judgment, and that judgment being to save these people because he said it was the right thing to do. And that's kind of a throwaway line, but that's a line that's not something that a computer would have said unless it was programmed with some sort of morality. And that's...
There's like... I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, there's like entire... there are more than one episode, like... how to phrase it, about whether Data is just a machine or like an actual life form.
Yeah, they go to trial over it because they want to disassemble Data for scientific research. But then does Data have rights to refuse? And they go through a whole huge trial. Yeah, that's it. That's one of the episodes.
And I get that particular argument, and it's a very good and valid argument because... at one point, does something stop being a machine and start being a person? They don't really go into that in this particular episode. It's just kind of a side tangent, like almost a throwaway line, but it is something to think about.
To spoil that other episode, in the end of the trial, they determine that they don't know, but that they will give Data the rights anyway because he's not property of Starfleet. So they let him basically be an autonomous machine since they determined they don't own him, therefore they cannot control him. So, and they leave it ambiguous as to whether he's alive or not, which is really a good conclusion.
It is weird because isn't Data like an officer in Starfleet?
Yeah.
Because then that theoretically does make him property of Starfleet.
That's why the trial was so confusing, because they're like, what do we do?
I mean, like, to be fair, back when you were in the National Guard or whatever, it's like, yes, you belong to National Guard, but like they didn't have the National Guard didn't have the authority to say,
shoot me and disassemble me.
Example. Yes.
No, well, they don't have the authority to do that, but BJ, I don't know if you knew this, but you do sign away a lot of the rights that you enjoy as a citizen. You sign away a lot of those rights when you join, because, like, for instance, normal citizens can't be asked to go and die for their country, in some ignoble way, and yet they can definitely order you to go and do something that would put your life at risk in the army, right? It's something that they can do. And so I'm imagining a lot of that same concept still exists in the universe of Star Trek, because that's how you make any sort of military institution work. And it's been that way for, oh gosh, I think the Romans understood this particular concept, so it's a very old and understood concept.
Understood it very well.
It transcends time and space. The concept of requiring a person to go and sacrifice themselves, or to make a person go and sacrifice themselves, is something that you're going to have to, that person is inherently going to have less rights than the society around them. And that's understood. Now, why they're doing that is, changes from era to era, but, in the same concept still holds true. So, yeah. So I imagine the concept would still be true in the time of Star Trek. So, it was, I don't know if it would have been in the full rights for them to fully, disassemble Data, but they probably could have at least poked around inside of his head, like plugged a USB into him to try to figure out what's going on with his core programming or something. I don't know.
Well, you have to remember this is back in the glory days when, their super fancy space computer was touchscreen and voice activated. So, it's basically like a really big tablet. But anyway, I was just trying not to laugh during during that because I just happened to be I'm listening to the audiobook of Starship Troopers at the moment, so I have heard a lot of soldiers' rights, citizens' rights, and all that stuff in the last few days.
Yeah, it's one of those it's an old concept. Heinlein got it. Gene Roddenberry apparently must have gotten it as well, or at least the writers of this particular series. Anyways,
if you can resign Starfleet, you can leave it if you don't like it. You can't necessarily stay. Like if you were aboard a spaceship and you said, I'm going to resign, I mean, they'd drop you off at the next place that they can drop you off to. And then you would go home. So, but at the same time, if they don't force you to do things based upon prison time. But if you do something really wrong, they do have jails in the 24th century, in this utopian universe. They do have jails. They still have criminals. But they don't have very many criminals. Their jails are reportedly very small. They're very humane. And the funny thing is most of the people that go into these jails, they're actually people who did something wrong trying to do something good. A lot of the criminals. Some of them, there's one guy who just schemes to be a really good pilot, and so he does a dangerous maneuver and gets somebody killed, and they throw him in jail for that. There's one example.
Is that just the ones that show up on the TV show? Because you can in our modern society, we have people, and there's actually always been people who just don't quite fit into society, and they are ill-adjusted, and they cause problems, right?
Well, I think one of the reasons why they have a utopia, I think the reason why in the Star Trek universe they have utopia is because of their ideals and how they treat each other, and it develops based on how people mutually are positive towards each other. But on top of that, they do have technology that eliminates a lot of scarcity. And one of those things is that if you really struggle within a society, you could, in fact, join a colony somewhere else. Or you could even live in a remote place by yourself if you really wanted to.
Or even live inside of a city and you just go to your apartment and your apartment would be linked right to like a holodeck. And so you'd have your food in your apartment and then you'd just go play in the holodeck and then you wouldn't leave.
So they don't actually show people that live lives like that in Star Trek, and they
I was
might
going to
exist.
say this is kind of outside the scope of the show, I think.
Well, the thing is, the show is about people journeying through space. They don't actually go to Earth and show you a neighborhood. They don't really do that, but they do talk about it occasionally.
That would be a much more interesting exploration, in my particular opinion, because when you find out the nitty-gritty of a society and how it really actually functions, that's much more interesting to me than to find out what the ideal and what the heroes are doing, because that's I mean, it's we that's very spectacular. That's very, it's great for like instant views, but the real explanation of how society works, the dark underbelly, that's a lot more interesting to me.
Yeah, Gary's over here like, okay, but what are the Benny Gesserit doing?
That's a lot of people are not going to know that reference, but
go watch our Dune episode, everybody. That was a pretty good one.
Watch Dune. Okay, so when they go to Earth,
need to watch
there's an
Dune
episode
on Netflix before it leaves. I think it leaves soon. I need to watch that.
Yeah.
Anyway, never mind.
Yeah. Now, okay, but they do spend a little bit of time on Earth. Captain Sisko, or Commander Sisko, actually, from Deep Space Nine, his family, his father runs a restaurant in New Orleans on Earth, and his customers don't pay. They just show up and he feeds them.
Well, it's kind of...
And he talks with them. And that's kind of gives you a view of what people do. People do things, and they just kind of share whatever it is that they have. And there's even some people who don't fit in within society because of technology. And so they instead live more primitive lives, like Picard's family. Picard becomes from a unique family on Earth because they've rejected technology.
Doesn't he have a vineyard?
They want to live in the 20th century.
Doesn't he have a vineyard or something?
He has a vineyard, and on the vineyard they use shovels and they pick grapes. They might use a little technology here and there when they need to, but they try to keep it as free of modern technology as possible, and they try to keep it more towards the traditions of the vineyard in France. So they keep it, and they distill the wine in giant wooden barrels. They do everything as old as they can. And there's also an original episode from the original series where they go to a planet and everybody is living with barns and animals, and they have no engines or electricity. And it's a human colony that decided that technology is bad for people's
soul.
Soul. Yeah, great. Yeah, soul. It's bad for your soul. If you don't work for things, you don't feel the reward like you should, and you lose something of yourself. You're not using your hands. You're not making things. Technology is doing all the work for you, and you're missing something because of that. So they chose to go find this planet where they can live without technology, and they can live in a society like that. So there is some of that too. So back to your point, like, where are all the bad people in this dystopian or this utopian world? There are many pathways that people could find meaning in life. You don't have to follow one path. There's lots of different options. And for people...
well, I wasn't necessarily describing a bad person, but Benjamin Franklin was once quoted as saying, most people, or not most people, but there are a certain amount of people in life who are good for not much more than turning good food into fecal matter, right?
Okay.
And what happens to those people, right? Because I can imagine everybody has a person like that in their life where they see this person and they just kind of get by doing the bare minimum. And so I imagine in a society like exists in the Federation, those people haven't gone away. So what do those people
I would imagine
not do? Right? Do they just sit in an apartment all day long, moving from their apartments to the holodeck and then back? Do they not exist? Have those people completely erased? Is that the one thing that this universe has done, is erase that kind of person?
As someone who's just kind of getting by at the moment, I feel personally attacked by this conversation.
I'm not, BJ, that we don't live in a post-scarcity society, so most of us actually have to work for a living. But there are people out there who, even if they're in a well-achieving job, don't apply themselves in any way, shape, or form, and it's just...
Let me put it this way, Gary.
Yes.
If you didn't have to get a paycheck, then you would pick a job that you wanted to pick, and
Well,
so you would go out and just do something.
that is the major hole that I have to poke in this entire quote unquote utopian society, is that what happened, and they never explore that. As far as I know, they never explore that in this particular in TNG or any of the others. They never really explore that of what happens to the people who do that.
Yeah, I'm not claiming that all of this is covered 100%. It's true that the audience is left to kind of work out some of it themselves.
So I think we had a conversation kind of like this. Forget exactly what episode it was, but we were talking about how sometimes a show or a book or a story in general is better off by just world building what it needs to, because if you start worrying about all the nitty gritty that yes you could think about but doesn't really affect the story you're trying to tell, you're just kind of burning you are putting effort into something that's not affecting the story or whatever. I think it's kind of that situation. It's fun to think. It's fun for fans to think about and theorize after, but it doesn't really affect the story. So I'm not gonna get mad at the creators for not addressing it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think BJ said it correctly, and I do have an answer to that, Gary. But the problem with it is that I think you're right. The show itself doesn't really spell it out completely. There is gaps within it, and it's gaps that the audience has to figure out for themselves. And maybe future writers can attempt it if they feel brave enough. They should probably be careful if they try to fill in those gaps.
Judging from how Trek's been, I mean, to be fair, I have not watched any new Trek because everything I've seen about it does not appeal to me in the least. But I don't think you should challenge new Trek writers to...
Yeah, I agree. Anything. No, you said it well. So my answer to that comes from this episode.
I don't know. I've heard really good things about, what was it, the Star Trek Picard, like the last season of it apparently is just amazing, but I haven't actually watched it myself, so I don't know.
The only thing I've heard about it is that they brought back the old crew and slapped them on like the old set.
So maybe it's like just a nostalgia bait.
Could be. Again, I've not watched it, so I can't really say for myself, but...
I can't either, so...
But the stuff and such I've seen for, like, newer Trek stuff, like Picard and Discovery and whatnot, did not appeal to me.
Well, okay. No,
so in this...
Oh, no, Jeff.
Go ahead, Gary.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to kind of wax on to something else, but no, Jeff, you go.
Okay, well, what I wanted to directly answer your question is that in this episode, you have the really greedy business guy from the 20th century, and he tells Picard, like, there's no money, this is awful, there's no reason, there's no purpose to anything. How do you grow and how do you do things? Where's your passion? How do you acquire, power and wealth? There's nothing to do. He basically says exactly what we've said in this conversation, the same line of questioning. What is the meaning if you cannot grow in wealth? What does it matter? And Picard says we've moved past those things, but he doesn't say that they don't grow. He says that they enrich themselves. They basically still, they learn new skills. They have experiences. They meet creatures who think differently than them, and they are able to learn. And they also go through experiences that are both terrifying and enlightening. So they get the worst and the best through all their experiences, and through all of that, they grow mentally. But they let go of the physical things because those aren't the things that they really need or care for. And he says that power like that is an illusion. To get all this stuff so that you can have power, the whole thing is an illusion to him. And then he comes and says, one last thing. So then he says, the rich guy says, well, I just don't, I don't see how it's all possible. Like how you live like that. And I think Picard doesn't really have a good answer after that, except when a girl across from him is crying, he goes over and comforts her. And in the he says, look, you're wrong because look, my wealth put me on a cryo freeze program that ended up saving my life and bringing me to the 24th century. So it basically says you're wrong. Wealth is power, and I'm alive as a witness of it, that it does work. And Picard doesn't have an answer to that. Instead, he goes over and comforts the girl who's upset. And I think part of it is that the show doesn't give you a good answer to that, but it shows that people in this time are helping each other and they're doing good and they're building a better world. And they may not have all of the types of power that he has, but what they don't have is really the burden from the wealth that they had to worship and also the need to control people. They don't have a need to control people in Star Trek that they do in other times.
Well,
people, go ahead.
It is a lot easier to do these things when you have the replicator as a concept, right? Because the replicator is the very like height of the post-scarcity society, where just because of energy, right? You have true matter energy conversion, where energy is converted into matter in whatever way or whatever form you need it to be. You don't need clothes, because if you want an outfit, you just walk up to the replicator and you say outfit number 3, and it pops out outfit number 3, and then you got pants and shirt, whatever, right? If you need food, you just walk up to a wall, you tap it, and out comes whatever food you're wanting, right? It's really easy to have these things when you have that level of technology. Obviously, it's something we don't have access to now, but
well, there's a difference between wealth in possessions and redundancy. So you're right that part of their technology makes it so they don't need a lot of redundancy. They could have like one outfit and that's it. Maybe they have 3 in their closet. And if they ever want to go to the holodeck and do a Shakespeare play, they can just replicate a Shakespeare costume and then go do it.
I don't even think they have an outfit. I think the way they have what they're wearing at the time, and then they toss it into a reclamation bin at the end of the day, and they get it. They replicate a pajamas.
Right.
And
yeah.
So I don't.
You're probably right.
They probably say
like, get rid of it.
These people from the past would be like, "Where's the closet? Where do I keep my clothing?" And the guy's like, "Closet? What's this closet thing?" And then walks up to the wall, gets his new clothing, or walks up to a shower and cleans it, gets clean. I think I've seen in other episodes they do have bathrooms still, and
they do, and they kind of show it.
They kind of but anyways,
yeah, there are civilizations though that there are people who refuse to use replicators. And Chief O'Brien, he also comes from a family where his mother refused to do any kind of fancy food technology. She would cook meat with her bare hands, and O'Brien's wife was surprised. It's like, you actually like touch raw meat and cook it? So yeah, you do have this abundance of technology and energy, which does help them. But the thing is it's very easy and tempting for them to still be greedy. Even with all that abundance that could easily be shared, it is still possible to be greedy even with that, and to say, okay, if you guys want replicators, you got to increase production by 10% or something like that to somehow extract more value out of people. What I would say is they're still giving up the need for possessions. That is the key part of what Roddenberry believed as part of the show. It's obviously just a story. I'm not saying it's more than that, but his idea was that it was the fact that people loved possessions was the real issue. I don't think Star Trek is a socialist utopia, because in socialism people are forced to give things up, they're forced by law to surrender wealth to the state that then distributes wealth.
Oh no,
But I don't think there's.
I know
This
it's
is
not,
more of a libertarian
I know
society than socialist society. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'd really hate to see what episode of Hoarders in the 24th century looks like.
A group of hoarders.
Yeah, have you ever seen that show or heard about it, Jeff? BJ, have you? Hoarders.
I've seen it. I've seen a few episodes of Hoarders.
I have not watched it.
Actually, had a friend who said, like he worked for like a cleaning service, and he said, because they went in to do cleaning post crime, and he said that kind of stuff is the worst. Like murder scenes is one thing, but that's just blood. Walking into a hoarder's house to clean up after they like get taken away to for their own good. Cleaning up after a hoarder is like the absolute worst. Is way more disgusting than anything else that he has to deal with. So I could just imagine what a hoarder episode or a hoarder would look like in the 24th century when they've got a replicator to give them all the things that they want, that they
just constantly replicate things all day long.
Because it's a mental,
just filling their house.
It's a mental condition, right? It's a mental condition.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with them mentally where they have to have these things. And don't tell me that or maybe they did. Maybe they figured out a pill to fix that particular mental condition, and they just have to make sure that those people take that pill all the time. Otherwise, that replicator is going to be very busy, and that's going to be one very full set of quarters.
Well, I mean, in this episode, they did apparently figure out, dead. So, because
they were dead.
People, like frozen, like post death because of like a embolism or like brain cancer or whatever it was. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's one of the weirder parts of the show is that they die, yet they were able to revive them because they have incredible medical technology. They can even go farther. It takes a lot more to die in the 24th century than it does in the 20th century. Like your body really has to be wrecked pretty bad because they can fix things a lot. But
so it turns out they can cure almost anything except for an extra being thrown over and except for an extra being thrown by an exploding council.
Yeah.
That's fatal every time.
Wait, what episode are you talking about?
Oh, like every episode ever where there's like an extra like at their station or whatever, and like they're in like a fight and they take damage, and so there's like a big explosion. So there's like an explosion, there's like sparks and stuff.
Their stations explode. I have another thing to say about that. Like,
Jeff, have you ever?
I do admit the whole station exploding thing is a little silly. I know why they do it in the storyline, because they need to provide drama and some amount of danger that's random and unexpected. But in reality, you would hope that there would be power mechanisms and fail safes that if there was a lot of energy getting through to a panel where it wasn't supposed to go, that there'd be ways of stopping it.
Yeah, they never heard of surge protectors in the 24th century. I guess that technology has been lost to time. Surge protectors.
Here's a question
a forgotten
that I came
technology.
up with while I was watching this episode.
Yes, BJ.
The people who magically show up to take over the station that the main cast leaves, what are these people doing when the main cast is there? Are they just
You're talking about another episode now.
No. I'm talking about this. Talking about this episode.
Okay.
Like when Data is at his station, he's like piloting. He's like piloting the ship or whatever, and he gets told to do something else, so he walks away. Another person comes from off screen immediately to take his place.
Yeah.
What is the replacement doing the rest of the time?
They probably have this elaborate computer program that organizes where they can be and where they don't need to be, and
So when
There's ways
so when
of
the captain
handling
spontaneously tells Data, "Hey, go take care of these people you brought on my ship that I just found about," the computer has predicted this and has told person C to show up to take Data's place.
Sure. Not predicted, but there's people standing by to take over a station if Data gets either blown up by the console
Okay,
or
but what are
has
these
to
people
go to an
doing
away
the rest
mission.
of the time?
They have stuff to do.
It's-
Hey, in our
stuff-
time,
it's stuff they
we're
can
next
do-
to a screen all day.
It's stuff they
Is
can
there
drop
always something to
immediately
do when
to
you're at
walk
a
over to
screen.
do this other thing. It's far enough for them to do it, but but so unimportant that they can immediately leave it and go do the other person's job. I mean, I know the actual answer to this is that because the plot said so, but I did not expect this to become like an actual conversation. It was just going to be a joke, and then just
No, you're right. I'm touchy.
No, it's
today.
BJ. They have enhanced themselves and made themselves better through the study of twiddling their thumbs. They are constantly improving the concept
Yes,
of twiddling their thumbs for hours on end, just waiting for their 5 seconds of screen time as the main character wanders off to go do something important for the plot.
at the same time, do you think that it seems like the main character, it seems like the command person walks away and the person takes over is like, oh crap, here's when this explodes and I die. I've read about red shirts way back when. I know this works.
I do have to wonder about uniforms as well, because I know one of the extras in this one walks on and it's a lady and she's wearing a very, let's say, not very appropriate uniform in some people's opinion.
Like a short skirt
where,
is what you're
yes,
talking about.
yes. What happened to the rest of her uniform? I know that Crusher has a full outfit. Admittedly, she's medical personnel, but come on.
Yeah, well, that's something else that Roddenberry really thought about, and that's probably something we didn't have.
BJ, you know the line. When I'm in charge, all the women will have tiny mini skirts.
I stopped myself from yelling tiny mini skirts like 10 seconds ago. So,
What line is this that you guys are quoting?
that is from the anime/manga Full Metal Alchemist. And to be fair, this does happen in like a comedy episode. It's like so long story short, it's a bit of a militaristic society. And one of the side characters, he aspires to become the high commander or like whatever of the society. And again, during the comedy episode, he says something along the lines, it's like, on this day, I'm going to make a regulation that all female soldiers have to wear tiny mini skirts.
It's just like, is that what the admiral did he become the admiral in charge of the Federation? Is that what's going on here? Or is it just a personal choice of this particular officer on the bridge? She chose to wear outfit number 10, which has which happens to show a lot more leg than the other outfits.
And well, to be fair, that does kind of become, ironically, the uniforms become a bit more, well, uniform later on. Like, I think even like Counselor Choi starts like wearing actual uniforms as compared to whatever the heck she's wearing.
I thought she always wore that gray jumpsuit. I never remember her being in anything other than that.
She wears a
pretty
variety of
sure
different things.
At some point, she gets like a
real uniform.
like a uniform.
No,
Yeah.
okay, so her situation is unique, and they don't explain it very much, but you can pick up on what's really happening. The reality is Counselor Troy is a Starfleet officer just like the rest of them, but she just doesn't want to wear the uniform because she doesn't say, but the basic point is that she wants, and this is me, okay, the show doesn't tell you why. She doesn't want to wear the uniform, she chooses not to. Picard doesn't care. That's the short answer to it. But in reality, she probably wanted to not wear the uniform for her patients, or because she just wanted to give off a different vibe or something like that. She actually is told once by a temporary captain. There's an episode where a different captain is in charge of the ship for temporarily, and he gets after her for it and says, you need to wear the regular uniform because, yeah, you're in Starfleet. And the behind the scenes answer is that they just didn't want her to wear the uniform. They thought she looked better in other outfits. So
fan service is always the answer.
Fan service is really, and as far as like the uniforms, the reality is it's fan service, and Roddenberry loved that kind of stuff. It was a big part. You know, you can't ignore the fact he had this utopian
you can't have a utopia
idea, and then he's like, also, let's make sure they all wear miniskirts.
Tiny miniskirts.
Roddenberry was definitely like that.
That is Roddenberry.
This is going to be taken out of context. It's just going to be us yelling tiny mini skirts. It's going to go terribly.
Yeah, it will.
I mean, it is applicable, BJ. It is very applicable, and when you see it, it just kind of sticks
in context. Yes, it is applicable. I'm just saying that if we ever go big and get popular, there's just going to be clips of us yelling tiny mini skirts.
I know.
Well, it's a funny joke.
It's Will. They're going to dig into our past
context,
to easily find what they need to discredit us.
All right.
Okay.
So,
can I say one thing about the uniforms real quick?
Sure,
and obviously they made the uniforms to be form-fitting for Roddenberry-related reasons, but when you think about it, if you're going to wear...
a drink.
No. Jeff, I fully understand that these uniforms in the context of being on a spaceship are actually very functional. It makes absolute sense. At least the uniforms that the men are wearing, where it's just kind of this generic jumpsuit, kind of a form-fitting generic. You don't want loose, flowing clothing.
Yeah, and the women do wear the same clothing a lot of times. They don't wear it all the time.
They don't wear the tiny mini skirts all the time.
I think
no, and as weird as it is,
might be a season 1 thing. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you're right. Season 2 on, they phase it out completely. You don't really see women.
There are actually a few dudes that wear mini skirts as well. In fact, the first person you ever see in the show has it. But anyway, that I won't go into because I don't know what. But anyway.
So what you're saying is that it's not a skirt; it's a kilt.
It's a kilt. Yes. Point is, as the audience, you can decide whatever it is. It's what they wear when it gets too hot, rather than changing the temperature or something. But clothing is not like so much in our time because once again, these are people who don't have material greed so much.
For instance, I understand Crusher's outfit being different because that's she's presenting as a doctor, and it's actually, I don't know if you knew this, that the white coat, she doesn't have a white coat, but she still has a coat of some sort on. It's one of those signals to patients that doctors often have. Like, you'll always see a doctor with either a stethoscope or a white coat or something along those lines. It kind of tells it's on an unconscious way that it tells the patient that they are a doctor. So it's kind of I guess that's one of those things that they're doing in the show to show that she's a doctor, and it's very useful in that particular sense.
So I want to say one thing real quick.
Mm-hmm.
You guys mentioned how the writers made mistakes in this episode, and that's fair. I disagree, but I think it was good you made the point, so at least it can be presented. But
so if I may, I'm going to add a little context here. I happen to be on the Wikipedia page for this episode, and because of the 1988 Writers Guild of America strike, this script was written in a day and a half. So
okay, yeah.
So
okay, that's good to point that out. So the great thing about Star Trek, one of the reasons why it is done so well compared to other things, is because Roddenberry came up with this idea where you would have a show that would have horror, action, mystery, romance, suspense, drama, but drama with some rules attached to it. You would have all that stuff, and you could have one or more of those in any episode or film that you wanted. But then to tie all those things together and to make them work, you, in the center of it all, you put in a cerebral plot line, some sort of theme that has a message for the audience that isn't supposed, that, as you don't want it to be overly preachy. You want the audience to kind of form a little bit of their own opinion about, but you have all of these, you might call them like satellite genres in Star Trek, where you scare the audience, and then you have a romantic subplot. The original series had lots of romance in almost every episode. And then you have action. A lot of people love the action in Star Trek, but Star Trek always has been about the cerebral core center of the storyline. And like in this episode, you had a little suspense that they threw in, and you had a little mystery, kind of. You had these people trying to discover what the 24th century is. You had the 24th century people trying to, I guess, react to their more primitive ways of the 20th century. You had all these things going on, but the central point of it all, there's a cerebral theme to it. And the cerebral theme of this episode is how humanity changes over time, how civilizations change. This is a show about new worlds and new civilizations, and it's showing you how things change, and when they change, I mean, the new world and the old world don't really understand each other as much, and it's showing all of this. Anyway, go ahead, BJ.
No, BJ.
Oh, I have something to say, but it's more of a joke. So go ahead, Gary.
No, actually, I was going to go move to a completely different topic, but BJ,
okay,
you say your joke.
Okay, so Jeff, what's the, how did you phrase it? The cerebral undertone of the bug episode.
The bugs go boom when you shoot them with lasers.
I like that.
So that episode,
I like that. I like that as a cerebral undertone. That works for me.
Or theme. That's the word. Theme.
I like that as a theme. It works. It works for me. Bugs go boom when you shoot them with lasers. That works really well as a cerebral
if you really want me to,
concept.
I could write write a 500-page novel and go over every cerebral plot over every episode.
We'll come back to that. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
So
Go ahead.
I was going to ask Jeff, did they ever answer what happened to all of these science stations?
Yes, they do.
Is
In
it
fact,
the crystalline entity?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Is this
I
the
can
Borg?
remember.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It turns out the Romulans and the Federation both have a Borg problem, but they don't know what it is. And at this point in the series, the audience has no clue as to what the Borg is at all. They're not introduced until the next season. And the Star Trek writers from behind the scenes, they were actually planning on making the Ferengi be the great antagonists. And that didn't work out at all. They kind of were like, well, the Ferengi don't work well as that. Let's change the Ferengi into something funnier, which was a great move. And then they came up with the Borg, which is a really much better villain and has a much deeper, cooler idea behind it.
Yeah, so the Wikipedia page does say that because of the short time frame they had to write the script, it did it forced the abandonment of the idea of a 2-part episode of the appearance of the Borg. So the Borg didn't appear until the Q Who episode.
Yeah, I do remember
so Q
that.
actually
Q's the one who introduces them to the Borg or something like that.
And to be fair, in hindsight, it's probably for the better that the Borg got
introduced to them by Q.
Well, no. I was going to say that it's probably better that the Borg got delayed because give them more time to hit their stride. Like, I don't think season 1 Borg would have been as good.
No,
No, you're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my major question of like, what the heck is happening here, really? Because even the Romulans don't quite know as much as they're posturing about it.
Yeah, I just remember the Chris Line Andy being pretty early in Next Gen, so I thought it might be that, but I guess it wasn't.
Yeah, and they try to make the Romulans scary in the episode, and they have to do it using historical background. They don't really have time in the episode to say, look how the Romulans attacked this outpost. And plus it would contradict the episode because the Romulans aren't the bad guy that they think they are. They are bad. They're just not the particular ones causing this problem.
Oh. I think in the ideal world, like Gary said, these would have been 2 separate episodes.
Yeah, it would have had 2 completely separate episodes because this entire Romulan subplot would have had its own, like, what the heck is happening here? And
yeah, it could have made the Romulans a bit more
intimidating.
A bit more, yeah, that's the word, intimidating.
I actually think what's really special about filmmaking is that on rare occasions, the accidents make the show better. I think Gary doesn't like that.
Gary disagrees in this case, I believe.
Okay, I'm not saying all accidents are wonderful and good, but I think when an accident does happen and that somehow makes the show better, I think it's fascinating to me.
I mean, there are examples of this, like like St. Jaws, for example. The shark not working most of the time led to the shark getting much less screen time, which pretty much everyone agrees is, in that case, it was a good thing. It did a better job of building tension and all that.
Yeah, and we probably are just talking about the success stories of that. The ones where things epically failed because of an accident, those movies probably don't get remembered as much. But yeah, so the Romulans and everything, even though it was hard on their pre-plan that they had made, I think it worked out better.
Don't know if I agree, but opinions are fun.
Yes. Everybody has an opinion, like other things. Anyways. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of, I've kind of run out of things to talk about for this particular episode. Yeah.
Yes, maybe in the future we might do more single episode of various TV things. This is kind of an experiment.
Yeah.
I'm out of things to talk about too, so somewhat reluctantly. Jeff?
No, we can have closing statements and go.
Yeah.
Closing statements.
And call it a quits. Call it another hard day's work.
Closing statements. Is this going to be like a high? This is going to be like a high counselor talk. In conclusion, you know, that joke. Jeff, do you have anything to conclude?
So I am quite a big Trekkie. And this episode,
questionable tastes.
Questionable taste.
We've talked about that
I am
before.
unique. Yeah, I'm a very unique Trekkie because I like a lot of it. And
because you like Star Trek, the motion picture.
I do. Star Trek, the motion picture is a huge fan favorite of mine. But I started to lose my passion for Star Trek very early on because you go into Deep Space Nine, and I love Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine started to get, as it progressed, it started to focus more on action. And remember, I gave that beautiful monologue about how Star Trek is cerebral with action, but many other things tied into it. And I think what the problem is you had this Star Trek show that's kind of like the Twilight Zone. It's a make you think sort of TV show and films and stuff. But most people look at it and they think, yeah, but I really just like the action. Give me more of that, please. Like, why can't you make this more like Star Wars? What's wrong with you? You're making this nerdy about people in pajamas exploring space. Why don't you give me more laser beams and Klingon ships and laser battles and stuff like that? And I think the problem is that after Roddenberry died, it took a couple years, and the writers and producers started to get tempted more and more by trying to exploit the part of the show that the fans think they wanted. And so they started to get a lot more into the action side of things in Deep Space Nine, but I still think the show had a good message to it. It still was well written for the most part. It still had good characters. It still had good like cerebral plots with a lot of fun other kind of genres tied into it. But then you get into Voyager and other things, and what I see is a gradual morphing of the show into what people think it's supposed to be, which is an action adventure comic book type thing. And then you got into the new films directed by a certain person.
I
Jeff?
felt this ramping up.
I'm not saying
we
the
made
name,
negotiations before this episode. You're not to talk about it.
I know.
I don't think we actually ever said that straight
But-
out.
But
the point is that
you're not going to talk about that.
Let the man cook.
Okay.
Yeah. So an Enterprise did a lot of things to build up the Star Trek universe and to add some things into it, but it was also very, very much on the action side of things. It was almost like they had this long-term military conspiracy plotline that looked more like it was from a comic book, where here's the bad guys plotting against the good guys, then they fight, sort of a thing. And so a lot of people like Star Trek, but I think the great tragedy of it all is that Star Trek is like this person that comes to school and they're a little bit weird and quirky, but they have their own jokes, they say things, they have their own opinions, and even though they wear tacky clothes and they don't conform to anything, they're an interesting person, so you become their friend, and then all the cool people start to like this person, and the cool people are like, but you're not like us, so change. And so they start wearing all the normal clothes that cool people wear. They repeat their same phrases, and they become what the cool people like them to be. And at that point, they then stop liking them. They go, oh, but you're not actually that good. And I think that is what I think happened to Star Trek, is that people didn't know why they liked it. They liked it because cerebral plot lines leave you feeling a little bit fulfilled a little bit. They take you through a journey and deliver a warm, fuzzy message at the end, or maybe a little ominous message, but the point is they make you think about things. And as much as it's not the action shooty kind of thing, it leaves you better off, I think. And I don't think people understand what Star Trek made, why it was so popular for so many years. It's not just because it's a space journey. Not because of that. It's because of what it's trying to show. It's a journey about a group of people who bond as a family, but they also go through anything they need to go through, and they learn from every experience and every encounter, and they work together as a team, and they give you all of these ideas along the way. You learn about stuff. It's like the trial with Data. There's like things to think about. So that's what I think people are missing out with Star Trek, is that they turned it into an action flick, and then they don't like it after they do that, and they're not sure why. And the rule is the audience never really knows what they want. They think they know what they want, but they actually don't. And even Hollywood struggles to know what the audience really wants. And if they listen to the audience and follow what the audience tells them to do, they often create products that the audience didn't really like. Because what the audience really wants is something that they don't really know. And I think it's probably tied to what Star Trek has made. And other great shows. All the great shows are the ones that actually gave the audience what they really wanted, that they didn't know they want. Anyway.
So that was
my
a
monologue
real,
ends
that was
right
that
there.
was a
Go
real
ahead.
inconclusion there, Jeff. That was real definite full on high counselor inconclusion.
No, if that was a real high counselor, if that's real high counselor thing, he'll be talking. We'd be going for like 3 hours.
Yeah. But it
would end with some foregone poetry.
Well, BJ, don't worry, because my in conclusion, I've got nothing else to say. So
I thought you already said that. So
yeah, I already did.
So in conclusion, you're going to repeat yourself.
Yes,
Very
in
good.
conclusion, I'm
Okay.
going to repeat myself. I've got nothing else to say.
In conclusion, see my previous in conclusion. Anyway, so yeah. So, gentlemen, our first TV episode that was a Christmas special. Is this something you think we're going to explore more in the future? I mean, chances are if we do another Star Trek episode, it probably won't be, hour and a half long. We lasted twice as long as the actual episode did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely, if you pick an episode later, I'll try to behave more. Yeah.
Well, no, we knew this was going to happen.
Yes.
I know.
You told us straight out when you said, I'm going to have us watch a Star Trek episode, but I'm going to use it as a springboard to talk about Star Trek. So we were like,
there's like a Lincoln quote that as soon as I get started talking, I get too lazy to stop. I think that's from Lincoln.
It's either Lincoln or Mark Twain that everyone says had a quote that they didn't actually quote, right?
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain.
And it's, long as you say something wacky, people will probably really believe it came from Mark Twain.
Anywho, so,
yeah, I'm quiet now.
Okay. So I guess that's it for this episode. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations to everyone who made it to the end. I was BJ. With me was Jeff and Gary, and we'll see you next time for whatever it is we talk about.
Tiny mini skirts.
Live long and prosper, not letting us end with tiny mini skirts.